Safety stems from order. Such is the way of things. The walls of Stygia will stand strong against any who wish to penetrate them, and its citizens, even those unfortunate souls who may have lost all connections to the Skinlands, may rest easy knowing that they are safe, at least for the moment, against the ravaging of Oblivion and its slaves, the Spectres. But this freedom comes, of course, with a price, and the citizens of Stygia and its many colonies of the necropoli of the Shadowlands often find that the dominating presence of the hierarchy, the authority of Stygia and its legions, is just another form of drawn-out anguish meant to grind souls down until they are only fit to become Oboli, the coin of the dead. The hierarchy of Stygia is every inefficient bureaucracy in history rolled into one. It is the enforcer of a strict hierarchical society where the bottom of the rung is used and abused, quickly replaced by new unfortunates when they are no longer fit for even the most basic of manual labor. The hierarchy has taken it upon itself to handle the matter of the newly dead, and thus most of the necropoli, the Shadowland equivalents of Skinland cities, were originally formed for the express purpose of finding and delivering new wraiths to the hierarchy in order to ensure due processing. Many of these souls were found to be too weak of passion to ever become a true citizen of Stygia, and thus they were sentenced to be reforged. Yet even knowing all this, the people of Stygia, at least the majority of them, spend their years as citizens of this bureaucratic nightmare, because they know that without Stygia and its hierarchy, they would be lost to the chaos and confusion of the underworld. And even more so, Stygia offers the chance for any wraith worth their salt to advance should they prove themselves a valuable member of this dead society, and at its core, it at least tries to have the majority's best in mind in how it rules. Yet undoubtedly it has its detractors. Renegades are those wraiths who are disillusioned with this heavy-handed system and fight for reform, either through dialogue or violence, and many of the heretics, spirits who preach and search for transcendence, claim that the hierarchy not only lacks interest in this noble pursuit, but actively opposes it in order to sustain their machinery. To the hierarchy's dismay, the fifth great Maelstrom severely weakened its connection with the many outposts and necropoli it had under its rule. Byways once considered safe were now lethal to traverse, and thus, in the modern nights, many a necropoli have found themselves forced to manage themselves, with some finding it hard to fight off the constant press of the heretics and the renegades. Sometimes Stygia will send its legions to clear out the rabble, but the fact that they don't always do this has only strengthened the general displeasure with how this empire is being run. And always, at its borders, Oblivion chews away at order, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. But let us discuss the origin of Stygia and its hierarchy before we delve into how it operates. Before Charon, the land of the dead was chaos, unpredictable and dangerous, yet also traversable by mortals who dared venture there in pursuit of their ambitions. The spirits of the dead were much closer to the mortal realm, and some would even occasionally return to it. But Charon, the very first ferryman, mapped out the great rivers of the underworld, and found the Isle of Sorrows. Realizing the danger of the Oblivion, unchecked and all-consuming, he and his ferrymen, fellow Hellenes from Mycenae, constructed the first civilization in the underworld, Stygia. It was established to stem the tide of Oblivion, and to help guide other lost souls on their paths to transcendence, and Charon ruled over it together with his senators. The Republic of Stygia was modeled after the most powerful government in the Skinlands, and those who died during that era provided fresh innovations and thoughts to this fledgling republic. The wars that followed as the Roman Republic, and later on Empire, expanded, provided Charon and his loyal wraiths with enough souls to form grand legions to fight off the specters and servants of Oblivion, and as time went on, more and more great minds would come to pass through Stygia. Charon decided only to fight Oblivion and to provide safe passage, but the wraiths who had helped form the Republic often bid these new arrivals to stay and share with them news of the Skinlands they had left behind. Many powerful and influential Wraiths also opted to stay in Stygia, fearing that their great deeds and reputations would mean nothing on the far shores ahead of them. Over time, Stygia continued to grow, and roads were built throughout the Tempest known as byways, although they were originally called itinera mortis, the roads of the dead. These were in fact constructed by the actual dead, souls reforged into paving stones and moaning in agony all the while. In fact, as nothing can be created from the land of the dead, everything from streetlights to books to new buildings would need to be made from the matter of spirits, and Charon himself set down strict rules for who, under what circumstances, could be reforged like this. But of course, those who wish to detract him will present a much more pragmatic and much less emphatic picture of him, where whoever wouldn't be missed would find themselves contributing to the greatness of Stygia. The first great Maelstrom occurred during the fall of Rome, and in its wake Charon would become the emperor of Stygia, discarding the last pretenses of a republic. His senate would become his 7 Deathlords, advisors to his rule, and with great responsibilities, yet reduced in power and authority. With the unrest that followed in the wake of the Maelstrom, the legions would swell as well, becoming more of an offensive rather than simply defensive force, and far fewer Wraiths avoided recruitment into these 7 legions upon their arrival to the Isle of Sorrows. There were, most likely, some senators who opposed Charon's decision to make himself emperor, but Stygia's public officials were, even back then, required to wear masks to signify their office, rather than their person. Thus, it is impossible to know how many, if any at all, of the Deathlords remained in office after this transition, and who might have become another stone in the road. The ferrymen opposed this change publicly, and Charon thus banished them from Stygia, as this was all that was in his power, for they still remained a powerful and prominent force in the land of the dead. There were those who argued openly that Charon had allowed the Maelstrom to strike Stygia, that he knew what the fall of Rome would bring, and that he merely used this as an opportunity to secure power over the city. But their voices, of course, grew silent over time. In the years that followed, Stygia would rise to new heights in terms of power, and Charon would decree the laws of Dictum Mortem, the Code of the Dead. These rules regulated Wraith's interactions with the Skinlands and the mortals, the Quick, who lived there, and would come to form the basis of the laws that still govern the realm of Charon. Naturally, this would work in Charon's favor, for without interactions with the mortals, the Deathlords found their influence waning even further, and Charon's power would be absolute. As feudalism took root in Europe, so too did it in Stygia, and the hierarchy was first born. While land would be the resource divided and cared for by nobility amongst the Quick, in the underworld it would instead be souls that would be portioned out. Charon ordained his Deathlords, and they in turn gave responsibilities to their legions to ensure the harvesting of weaker souls before they could be claimed by Oblivion. The arts of the undead, the Arcanos, were of course one of the many things that needed to be regulated by Charon's decree. Many of these skills were unknown to the common masses until Charon announced the formations of the guilds. These were all intended to teach their arts to those who were found worthy of learning them, and maintaining the secrets surrounding their more advanced forms. And, as with all things, this not only helped unite the people, but also ensured a healthy competition between these new factions, who all greedily desired to keep their Arcanoi from falling into unworthy hands. In a stroke of genius, Charon ensured that his Deathlords likewise would support their own preferred guilds, and thus they too would be drawn into this meaningless rivalry and game of politics, shielding him from their machinations. Another great Maelstrom would strike the walls of Stygia during the European plagues, but Stygia held fast, and its artificers worked tirelessly to melt the souls of thralls into material as they came to the land of the dead in droves. During the Crusades, Charon found opposition in the Fishers, who were the first group to challenge his authority in a meaningful way, but through cunning manipulation he rid himself of these Fishers and their Crusaders, and finally, during the Age of Reason, Charon announced, through the Proclamation of Reason, that any Wraith who would preach against Charon, or that would argue that they were agents from the far shore there to help souls pass through, would be branded as heretics and enemies of Stygia. Indeed, the Proclamation of Reason explained that there were no far shores. This was the final destination for them, and it was either Stygia or Oblivion that they would choose between. Charon established the Council of Inquisitors, the Magisterium Veritatis, and the Order of the Unlidden Eye, in order to root out any and all who would oppose him. In time, this would come to mean renegades, heretics, and any other traitor to the cause of Stygia. Their agents would come to be known as the Grim Reapers, masked individuals who would stop at nothing to hunt down and bring their prey to justice. The unrest of the 1500s and forward, where the growing middle class came to question the rigidity of the feudal system, resulted in countless Wraiths arriving to the Shadowlands, burning with passionate anger and righteous fury at the injustices of the system. This would come to spark the third Great Maelstrom, which in turn forever changed the underworld, turning the darkness into the Tempest, from which it has never recovered. In the wake of these events, the guilds were disbanded by Charon for having tried to wrest power from him due to their increased belief that they were more suited to ruling over Stygia. Any Wraith found to be a member of a guild would be banished, or worse, and the legions from then on would handle teachings of the Arcanoi to their recruits. The third Great Maelstrom had also severely damaged Stygia's connections with the Skin World and the Shadowlands, and thus the Necropoli, that until then had only played a minor role in the great scheme of things, became important links for Charon and his Deathlords to ensure the funneling of souls to their legions and forges. All the while, renegades and heretics would be leaving for the shores of the New World, fed up with the restrictions put on them by the hierarchy. Charon, witnessing the events during the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment, as told to him by newly arrived Wraiths, realized he would come to need the power of the middle class of Wraiths, the free Wraiths, if he wanted to keep his power. Thus, he commissioned the artificers to create countless blades from soul steel, and he would give these weapons to any free citizen of Stygia who would swear loyalty to him and the Deathlords. Of course, he also made sure to imbue these swords with some manner of art that enforced this oath, or at least strengthened it. By arming his potential enemies, Charon ensured that publicly he would appear benevolent and understanding of his own weakness against them, but he would also trap his enemies in their oaths. The trade of thralls, a kind of word for slaves, blossomed, of course, as Charon's edicts of who could be soul-forged became less and less laws and more guidelines that could be easily circumvented by Reapers, who figured out how to sever a Wraith from their fetters, turning them into near-mindless spirits that could be sold as materials. As the human world went through the Enlightenment and then Industrial era, so too did the playing field of Stygia's political scene continue to evolve and change. But the biggest change was yet to come, of course. The three grandchildren of Cain wait patiently for the time of judgment to arise. Bambi Parsons, a leader with an unbreakable will, Procyon, who has been reborn as a god amongst Cain's angels, and Dugal, whose thirst for blood is matched only by his strength of will and purpose. Their childer, the Methuselah, control our every move through their timeless jihad. They are Her Satanic Majesty Dani, whose mere presence chills the blood, Maximilian S. Hardcastle, a tutor and master of the jihad, Socrates Johnson, a masterful craftsman of stories, Lauren Eason, a trustworthy ally and friend, and Alexander Kishtaria, a esoteric scholar and mentor in magecraft. On the council of the Primogen are seated Edward Reed, Ian Nichols, Ravenfang, the Autumn Alchemist, and Michelle Light, wise leaders and of good judgment. And this week the council would wish to thank the Elder Dogma for your continued insight into matters of our common interest. We would also wish to give our regards to the Ancile blind man, whose service to the council has not gone unnoticed. Thank you for your support. Naturally, all our elders, Ancile and neonates receive our gratitude from the bottoms of our hearts. Without your support, this would not be possible. And thank you for watching.